Hi guys, we're back for part 2 of this Jeep revival series where I'm getting my old Jeep TJ ready to be put back on the road after being parked in my backyard for the past 7 years. In the last video I changed the upper control arms, and today I'm going to be tackling the front drive shaft. So let's get started. Alright, so let's get the Jeep up on the lift. Don't forget that Parts Matrix is the official parts supplier for this channel. Parts Matrix has access to hundreds of brands and millions of parts, so they'll have everything you'll ever need. And if you use discount code NHBH, you'll save even more off your order. For more information, see the video description below. And now back to our install. Okay, so we're just under the Jeep, near the front axle. We're just behind the front axle here, and we can see the front drive shaft runs up under the skid plate to the transfer case back there. So we're just going to remove these two caps that'll allow the drive shaft to pop out. Now these U-joints don't look too bad. I was pretty good at keeping the U-joints well lubricated. I would grease them every time I would go out for a run, but it's been parked for a long time, so I figure let's change everything. I can tell something has been clunking up front, so let's get at that. Okay, so let's get those bolts out. These are tiny little 8mm bolts. So I've now got the two bolts out and one strap off. I'll get the other side now. And if we turn the wheels just a little bit, we can access those other bolts. Okay, so now that we have both straps off, we're going to lower the Jeep again and get some weight on the front axle. That's going to push the front axle forward just enough that we should be able to get that free. Okay, so we can see now as we lower the lift, that front drive shaft's just going to pop out. There. So now that that's loose, let's get back under and we'll pull it out of the transfer case. Okay, so I lifted the Jeep once more just so we can get easier access to those back bolts. You can do all of this on the ground, and actually working on Jeeps, if you have a lift on them, it is much easier working on the ground. But sometimes it's nice just to not have to lay down on the ground and access stuff. So I'm going to go up and down as I need to. But right now that front drive shaft is loose. So I'm just going to get the 4 bolts at the back. Again, these need an 8mm socket. I'm just going to use a 1/4" ratchet and get those out one at a time. Leaving the transmission and transfer case in neutral helps. That way you can rotate the shaft as you need to get out all the bolts. Okay, so I've got all 4 of those bolts out. So now with those out, we're just going to pull the drive shaft forward. And hopefully you can see back there the yoke that's on the front of the transfer case. Okay, so we've got our drive shaft out here. And we can see we've got 1 U-joint in the front and we've got 2 in the back. Okay, so I've got the drive shaft here on the workbench, and I like to use my ball joint press to remove these. Now a vise works fine with some sockets and stuff. You can press those out pretty easily, but I do like how the small end fits nicely into the hole where the yoke is, and I like to be able to put the impact on it and save some time pushing those out. So the first thing I'm going to do is remove these little clips. I can try just giving this a squeeze and they may come out. Oh, look at that. That was pretty easy. But often these will rust inside of the grooves, and what you may have to do is take a pair of pliers and squeeze and sort of work a screwdriver all the way around and work it out of that groove. And worst case, if it does break off, you can break off pieces and just use a chisel to try to get that out. That one came out nicely. Now the other side. So this one's a little more stuck. There. So both of those came out real nice. I think it pays that I put so much grease on these over the years that nothing is seized in this area here. So these were probably good joints, but like I said, we're going front to back, replacing everything. So we're gonna pull this guy out next. Okay, so I've just got the C-clamp here in the vise, and I like to put it in this position so that the drive shaft can lay on the workbench. So what we're looking to do is we're going to push the U-joint deeper into the yoke. And what should happen is that it's going to push the U-joint and the other cap out the other side. We'll be able to remove that cap, flip it around, and push the other cap out. And that should give us enough clearance that we can shimmy that U-joint out. Okay, so you can see we've got that U-joint pushed through, and we'll see if this cap will come off. So yeah, that cap comes off easily. Now we can just rotate that U-joint and get it out. So we didn't need to take the second cap off. So now I'm going to clean all this up and we're going to install the new one. I'm just using a wire brush on the yoke and cleaning out the snap ring grooves with a small pick. Okay, that's nice and clean now. So we're going to grab one of our U-joints here. You can see in the background here, we've got an assortment of U-joints and some parts for the Jeep, all from partsmatrix.ca. Okay, so I have our U-joint here, and you can see here the hole in the body for the grease fitting. Now it's important when you're installing this to consider the direction of the fitting when you install it. In this case, I want the fitting on the drive shaft side. So when I have it installed, I can access that grease fitting from the side away from the axle. That way there I can get my grease gun in a little easier. So it's going to go in this position. So to install this, what I'm going to do is carefully remove one of the caps. And if you hold these vertically, you can keep the needle bearings from coming loose. Grease should hold those in there anyway. Then I'm going to flip it over. I'm going to take another cap off. Now I'm carefully going to slide the U-joint into place. And slide one of the caps in. I'm just going to slowly push that cap in, making sure that it's not jamming up on the other side. And for this, I'm just going to use a ratchet and not the impact, because I don't want to force it in too hard. So making sure that the cap stays straight, I'm going to slowly push that in. And you'll check every so often to be sure that nothing's binding up. Now I'm not going to push it all the way in, I'm just going to push it till it's flush. I'm going to get the other cap on. Now we're going to start pushing this one in. Just have to be sure that nothing's binding on this side. You can see that's moving really nice. So now I'm just going to push it in carefully, watching where that groove is for the lock ring. I'm going to push it just far enough that I can get that clip in. I think that's good. Could maybe use a little more. Okay, so we're going to try to get this clip in. There, so that clipped in real nice. Now we're going to spin it around. And we're going to go back to that first cap, and we're going to push that in until we can get that clip on. So we can see here this clip isn't quite setting. So we're just going to put it back in here and we're going to give it a little push with the clamp. And I don't know if you heard that, but it actually snapped into place with as soon as we released that clamp. Now I'm just going to take my screwdriver and go around and make sure that's fully seated. You can see on this side it is, but it can go a little more on the bottom here. There. So that's all seated nicely. I'm going to double check the other side. So this side looks good, but I think it could take a little more up here. So we're just going to press this a little more. Okay, so that's one done. Now let's jump on the other side. All right, so on this end we have what's called a double cardan setup. So we've got basically two U-joints that allow it to do this little bit of a flex and twist, a little more articulation, but the process is still the same. We're going to remove these outside clips, remove this U-joint, then we're going to remove these two clips and remove this whole cardan assembly, and then we'll remove these two and remove that last U-joint. So I'm going to get to it. Okay, so I got the first U-joint out of that double cardan setup here, and you can see as I remove the ball joint, part of this little double cardan yoke came out of it. And if we take a look inside of here, we have another set of needle bearings just inside of there, and mine are looking a little dry right now, so I'm gonna go get some grease. I'm gonna add some grease in there just to keep those needle bearings from coming out, and I'll make sure this is cleaned up before it goes back in. Alright, so as you can see from my multiple attempts, removing the middle U-joint on these double cardan setups is really tricky because this one's sort of encased in here. As you can see, it took a couple of tries before I finally got it out. I had to remove almost all the caps before I got it out. And when I reinstall, that's what I'm going to do, is I'm going to remove all 4 caps. That'll let me slide that in a lot better than I'll push in the caps from the outside. So I'm just going to clean all this up and then we're going to reinstall the U-joints. Okay, I've got everything cleaned up now. So I've got the needle bearings here all greased up, ready to go back in. Also going to grease the inside here, but only just before I install this. So let's grab another U-joint. Let's get this installed. So as I said, this enclosed one here, I'm going to remove all the caps first to make it easier to get this one in. Now in this case, there's not too many ways that you can reach the grease nipple on these, so I'm going to put it on the side outside of that whole double cardan cage, and hopefully I'll have a chance to reach it there. This is one of the cases where you'd want to have one of the style with the grease nipple in the cap. And I'm going to slide one of the caps in from the bottom. Okay, I'm just going to press that cap in. Okay, I've got all those 3 U-joints changed. Now let's give this a coat of paint before we put it back in. Alright, so this paint is now dry and I've got these U-joints greased up. Now before I do install this, because of these double cardan joints, it's really difficult to get at these grease nipples here. So I'm just going to pull those out and I'm going to replace them with some flush mount ones that'll give us a little more clearance. Okay, so now we can see that we no longer have any issues with clearance. That's going to be perfect. Alright, so let's get this back in the Jeep. Okay, so for reinstall, I'm just going to slide the front drive shaft back into the skid plate into place. I'm just going to balance it here temporarily while I grab some wire. And I'm going to use some wire just to tie up the front to support the weight so it doesn't slide down while I'm trying to put those bolts in. Then I just wiggle it into place so that the U-joints fit into the yoke. And one by one, I tighten up those bolts by hand. And I'm going to come back later and check the torque on these, but they don't need very much. They're very small bolts. Okay, so now I'm just going to lower the Jeep back down on the ground so that the weight will allow the front axle to move forward. And then we're going to crawl under and attach that front U-joint to the front yoke. Okay, so I've got that drive shaft installed now. So that's it for the front drive shaft. And I've got the transfer case in neutral. So you can see as I turn the front wheel here, that drive shaft turns nice. So that's another item crossed off on the list on this Jeep Revival. Next, we're going to move on to the rear drive shaft. I hope you're enjoying this series. And if you have any ideas or comments, please let me know in the comments below. I'd like to again thank PartsMatrix.ca for their support on this project. Don't forget to use discount code NHBH for extra savings. You'll find links to items used in each video in the description below. If you enjoyed this video or found it helpful, I'd appreciate it if you gave it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, please do. And I'll see you in the next one.